Welcome to her new peak. Subscribe for stories of growth, resilience, and new beginnings. Chapter 1. When Graham West brought his mistress into the house his wife had restored with her mother's inheritance, he did not apologize. He placed one hand on the woman's lower back, smiled as if he had solved an awkward business problem, and told Evelyn to be civil. The word hung in the foyer like smoke. Evelyn stood halfway down the staircase, one hand on the oak railing she had sanded and stained herself during the first year of their marriage. Behind Graham, the winter rain glittered on the shoulders of his black coat. Beside him, Lila Moore stepped onto the marble floor in red heels, carrying a small overnight bag and wearing Evelyn's pearl earrings. Not similar earrings. Hers. Evelyn's mother had worn those pearls on the day she opened the first Whitmore Children's Clinic. Evelyn had kept them in a blue velvet case in the bedroom safe, not because they were the most expensive things she owned, but because they still carried the scent of her mother's lavender drawer paper in memory. Lila touched one pearl with 2 fingers and gave Evelyn a careful smile. "I hope this does not have to be uncomfortable." Graham sighed before Evelyn could answer. That sigh had become his favorite weapon. It made every wound she named sound like extra work. "Evelyn," he said, "do not make this dramatic." She looked from his face to Lila's earrings. "You brought her here." "Because hiding is childish. We are adults. Lila will stay in the East guest room for a few days while her apartment is being handled." Handled? There was a leak. Evelyn almost laughed. The house had 7 bedrooms, 4 fireplaces, a library built from walnut imported before her grandfather was born, and one marriage that had been leaking for years. Of all the rooms in the city, Graham had chosen hers for his mistress because cruelty was never enough for him unless it had an audience. Lila glanced at Graham. "I told you this was a bad idea." The sentence was performed softly, but Evelyn heard the pride underneath it. Lila wanted credit for pretending to resist the invitation. She wanted to look reluctant while standing under another woman's roof with another woman's pearls against her throat. Graham removed his gloves. "I pay for this house." Evelyn descended the last steps slowly. "No, you do not." His mouth tightened. "Do not start. The mortgage was cleared by my family trust before we married. The renovations were paid through the Whitmore preservation account. Your name is on the dinner invitations, Graham, not the deed." Lila's hand dropped from the pearls. Graham's eyes sharpened, but he recovered quickly. He always did when pride was at stake. "This is exactly what I mean. You weaponize details instead of seeing the larger picture." "The larger picture is standing in my foyer with my earrings." "They are earrings," he snapped. "You have boxes of jewelry you never wear." Evelyn felt something inside her become very still. For 8 years, she had translated Graham's dismissals into stress, ambition, grief, pressure, public expectations. She had taken the sharp edges of him and wrapped them in explanations so no one else would cut themselves. But that night, with rain on the marble and Lila's red heels beside the umbrella stand Evelyn's mother bought in Florence, the old habit finally failed. Graham softened his voice, not because he was sorry, but because he sensed resistance. "Lila and I are not trying to hurt you. I need peace in this house. The gala is in 4 days. Sponsors are nervous after the board rumors. I cannot have my wife looking unstable." "My wife?" The title came only when he needed her to behave. Evelyn looked at Lila. "Take off the earrings." Lila blinked. "Graham gave them to me." "He had no right to." Graham stepped between them. "Enough. You will not humiliate her." Evelyn looked at the man she had once loved so deeply that she memorized the sound of his key in the lock. He was handsome in the expensive, maintained way of men who believed fitness and tailoring were moral virtues. His hair was silvering at the temples. His wedding ring was still on his finger, shining under the foyer light. "You are asking me to be civil," she said, "while you bring your mistress into my home wearing my mother's pearls." "I am asking you to be mature." The distinction to him was obvious. His betrayal was complicated. Her pain was childish. Evelyn turned and walked past them toward the coat closet. Graham frowned. "Where are you going?" She took down her camel coat and slipped her arms into the sleeves. Her hands did not shake. That surprised her most. "Out." "Do not be ridiculous. It is raining." She picked up her handbag from the console table. "Then I will get wet." Lila whispered, "Graham." He ignored her. "If you leave this house tonight, do not expect me to chase you." Evelyn paused at the door. Rain breathed against the glass. Behind her were 8 years of marriage, carefully hosted dinners, rewritten speeches, public smiles, fertility appointments he missed, board calls she saved, and 1,000 humiliations folded small enough to fit inside the word civil. She opened the door. "That is the first kind thing you have offered me in months," she said. Then she walked out. Chapter 2. Graham West believed his wife would return before midnight. He believed this because Evelyn had always returned. She returned after he forgot their anniversary because a mayor needed him at a private dinner. She returned after he introduced her as the quiet one to a room full of donors who had been invited using her family's contact list. She returned after he missed the second fertility consultation and later suggested, gently, that perhaps her body was trying to tell them something. Evelyn returned because she had once thought endurance was proof of love. Graham poured himself a drink in the library and waited for the sound of her key. Leela sat across from him on the leather sofa, still wearing the pearls because she had decided removing them would look like defeat. "She hates me," Lila said. "She hates disruption." "That is not the same thing." Graham looked toward the hallway. He had expected Evelyn to stand there by now, pale with rain and regret. Instead, the house remained heavy and quiet. He disliked the silence. When Evelyn was home, silence felt arranged. She knew when to bring tea, when to leave him alone, when to enter a room with a file he needed before he asked for it. Without her, the house felt less like a residence and more like a museum of things he did not own. He pushed the thought away. "She will calm down," he said. Lila crossed her legs. "You said she knew about us." "She knew enough." "That is not an answer." Graham looked at her then, annoyed by the tremor of uncertainty in her voice. Lila had been exciting in part because she did not require reassurance. At the Whitmore Cultural Trust, where Graham chaired the Public Partnership Committee, she had been bright, ambitious, and useful. She knew how to flatter donors without sounding cheap. She knew which journalists needed wine and which needed access. She made him feel less like a husband aging inside a graceful house and more like a man still capable of being wanted recklessly. But recklessness became inconvenient when it asked questions. "Evelyn is attached to appearances," he said. "She will not damage herself publicly." "What if she does not care anymore?" Graham smiled. "She cares. Women like Evelyn care about legacy, manners, family names. She may sulk, but she will not burn down the life she spent years building." The arrogance in that sentence did not sound like arrogance to him. It sounded like knowledge. Across the city, Evelyn sat in the back of a black car and watched rain blur the lights of the avenue. She had not called a friend. She had called Nora Keene. Nora was 71, silver-haired, severe, and had served as general counsel to the Whitmore family office since before Evelyn was born. She had arrived at the curb within 19 minutes, not driving herself, of course, but seated beside her driver with a wool blanket and a thermos of coffee. "I assumed this night would come," Nora said after Evelyn climbed in. Evelyn wrapped the blanket around her shoulders. "That sounds less comforting than you think." "Comfort is rarely useful in the first hour." Evelyn closed her eyes. She wanted to laugh and cry at once, and her body chose neither. He brought her into the house. "Yes. Wearing my mother's pearls." Nora's face changed by 1 degree. Anyone who did not know her would have missed it. Evelyn did not. That was unwise. "Nora." "Cruel, then." The correction helped. Evelyn had spent years softening Graham's behavior because blunt language felt disloyal. Hearing the truth named without drama made her lungs open. "I want the house secured," Evelyn said. "Inventory the jewelry, change the access codes, pull the trust documents, and I want a full review of the Whitmore Gala sponsorships tied to Graham's committee." Nora looked at her. "Tonight?" Evelyn saw Graham's face again, patient and cold, saying, "Be mature." "Tonight." Nora nodded and took out her phone. The Whitmore name was old money by city standards, which meant everyone recognized it and few understood its machinery. The family did not own everything directly. It held properties through preservation trusts, funded clinics through donor-advised vehicles, controlled art collections through nonprofit boards, and sponsored cultural galas through committees that looked decorative until someone read the bylaws. Graham had never read the bylaws. He enjoyed the stage they gave him. He liked standing under the gold ceiling of the Whitmore Museum, welcoming donors to the annual gala, speaking about civic duty as if he had invented it. He liked that journalists called him a bridge between private wealth and public good. He liked that Evelyn stood beside him in understated gowns, looking proud enough to support him and quiet enough not to compete. What he did not know was that Evelyn had spent the last 6 months reviewing irregular sponsorship promises, consulting agreements, and donor access packages that Lila had helped arrange under Graham's authority. He did not know Evelyn had delayed action because the Gala funded 3 pediatric trauma rooms and a scholarship program. He did not know the board rumors he dismissed had begun with Evelyn's questions. The car turned toward the Whitmore house, a smaller private residence behind the museum gardens where Evelyn had lived after her mother's death. The windows glowed in the rain. Nora had already had the staff prepare a room. When Evelyn stepped inside, the house smelled faintly of cedar, old books, and lemon polish. No one asked why she was wet. No one stared. A housekeeper named Marta took her coat with the grave tenderness of someone receiving evidence. Evelyn walked into her mother's old study. On the desk sat a framed photograph of Elaine Whitmore wearing the pearls. Evelyn touched the frame. "I left," she whispered. For the first time that night, her voice broke. Nora stood in the doorway and let the silence hold. Chapter 3. By morning, Graham was angry. Not frightened. Not yet. Fear required imagination, and Graham could not imagine Evelyn outside the role he had assigned her. He could imagine inconvenience. He could imagine gossip. He could imagine Leela becoming anxious and donors asking delicate questions at the gala. So he experienced anger first, because anger made everything simpler. Evelyn had not come home. Her phone went to voicemail. The East guest room had been prepared for Lila, but Lila slept badly and emerged at breakfast without the pearls. Graham noticed immediately. "Where are they?" "On the dresser." "Why?" "Because I am not stupid." He looked up from his coffee. "Meaning?" "Meaning she looked at those earrings like they were a body." Graham set the cup down too hard. "Do not become poetic. Evelyn has always been sentimental about objects. And you gave one of those objects to me. I lent them to you." Lila's laugh was short and humorless. "That is not what you said when you fastened them." He hated that she remembered the tenderness. It made him accountable to it. His phone buzzed, a message from his assistant. "Mrs. West's office canceled your joint interview with City Ledger. They said all future Gala communications require direct approval from Whitmore Trust Council." Graham stared at the words. Mrs. West's office. Evelyn did not have an office in his mind. She had committees, lunches, guest lists, quiet charity obligations. But an office implied staff, authority, action. He did not like the shape of it. Another message arrived, this time from the museum director. "Need to discuss Gala seating chart. Nora Keene requested removal of Leela Moore from sponsor table pending review." Graham stood so abruptly his chair scraped the floor. Lila went still. "What happened?" "Evelyn is being vindictive." "About the Gala?" "About everything." He called the museum director first. No answer. He called Nora Keene next. Her assistant informed him Miss Keene was unavailable and all requests should be sent in writing. He called Evelyn 16 times between 9 and 11. Each call went unanswered. At 11:30, a locksmith arrived at the house. Graham found him at the front door with 2 security technicians and a woman from the property management office. "What the hell is this?" The woman looked at a tablet. "Access control update authorized by the Whitmore Residential Preservation Trust." "This is my house." She hesitated only because he sounded so certain. "Sir, the trust owns the property. I live here. Your resident access remains active for 30 days pending legal review. Guest access is being revoked." Lila appeared behind him at the top of the stairs. "Guest access." The phrase moved through the foyer with surgical precision. Graham lowered his voice. "You cannot revoke access for my guest." The woman remained polite. "The current occupancy permissions do not allow non-family overnight residents without trustee approval." "I am family." "You are a spouse of a beneficiary." It was a small correction. It shattered something large. Lila's hand tightened on the railing. Graham felt heat rise along his neck. The technicians began changing the side entrance code while he stood there, unable to stop them without creating the kind of scene he had accused Evelyn of wanting. His phone rang. This time, it was Victor Hale, a longtime donor and board member whose approval Graham had cultivated for years. "Graham," Victor said, voice cool. I am hearing troubling things. Graham walked into the library and shut the door. Evelyn is upset. She is using trust counsel to embarrass me. Is Lila Moore living in your wife's house? The directness stunned him. That is a private matter. Not if she has been included in Gala sponsorship discussions while personally involved with the committee chair. Graham's mind began arranging defenses: consent, disclosure, informal role, no financial harm, emotional overreaction. He reached for the version that sounded most noble. Lila has been essential to donor outreach. So was Evelyn, Victor said, though I understand you forgot to mention that for several years. Graham's fingers tightened around the phone. Who told you that? Read your email. Nora sent the preliminary packet. The call ended. Graham opened his inbox. The packet was there, sent to all trustees, senior Gala sponsors, and committee officers. The subject line was restrained. Governance review. Gala sponsorship conflicts and access controls. He opened it. The first page listed no accusations, only dates. Lila's consulting payments. Donor introductions routed through Graham's private account. Hotel suites booked under cultural trust sponsorship codes. Luxury travel charged as outreach expenses. Proposed seating upgrades offered to donors who contributed through entities linked to Graham's private ventures. Evelyn's name appeared in the final paragraph. At the direction of Evelyn Whitmore West, beneficiary representative and interim chair of the Preservation and Civic Programs Committee, Council has initiated a review to protect restricted charitable funds and ensure the Gala proceeds without disruption to hospital and scholarship beneficiaries. Interim chair. Graham read the words twice. Then he called Evelyn again. This time he left a message. You are making a mistake, he said, struggling to keep his voice calm. Whatever you think I did, we should handle it privately. Do not punish the Gala because you are angry about Lila. Call me. He hung up before his voice could crack into something less controlled. In the study at Whitmore House, Evelyn listened to the message once and deleted it. Nora looked up from a binder of trust documents. He will try to frame this as jealousy. I know. Then we keep the record boring. Evelyn almost smiled. Your favorite kind. Boring records survive dramatic men. Evelyn turned to the next page. There were signatures, invoices, hotel records, donor letters, screenshots from Lila's office calendar, and one photograph of Lila wearing the pearls at a private sponsor dinner 2 weeks before Graham brought her home. Evelyn stared at the image longer than she needed to. Then she wrote one instruction in the margin. Recover the earrings before Gala. Chapter 4. The city loved a gala because a gala allowed wealth to pretend it had dressed up as virtue. Evelyn knew that better than anyone. She had grown up behind the velvet ropes, watching donors admire themselves in museum glass, while nurses from the clinics thanked them for checks their accountants had recommended. Her mother had taught her not to despise the performance too much. If vanity could be converted into operating rooms, take the money and build the operating rooms. Just make sure the vanity never became the mission. Graham had forgotten that last part. Or perhaps he had never understood it. 3 days before the Whitmore Civic Futures Gala, Evelyn sat at the head of a long conference table inside the museum's private archive room. Around her were Nora, the museum director, 2 auditors, Daniel Price from Donor Relations, and Malcolm Reed, the man whose presence Graham would soon misunderstand most violently. Malcolm was a widower, 42, and founder of a national legal aid network for children aging out of foster care. He had known Evelyn for 5 years through the Whitmore clinics, where his organization helped families navigate guardianship and medical consent. He had a quiet face, dark eyes, and a habit of listening as if every sentence deserved a place to land. He was also, as of 8 months earlier, Evelyn's legal husband. Not in the way gossip would later imagine, not an affair, not revenge, not a secret romance blooming behind Graham's back while Evelyn played betrayed wife. It had begun as a private legal arrangement after Evelyn discovered Graham had been quietly positioning himself to influence her family assets through spousal advisory rights, future charitable appointments, and proposed estate documents his attorney called practical planning. Evelyn had already separated from Graham emotionally, if not publicly. The marriage had been broken behind closed doors for years, but Graham's public image, the clinic's funding cycles, and her mother's unfinished commitments had made immediate exposure dangerous. Malcolm had offered protection when Nora presented a narrow legal path: dissolve the old marital property assumptions, restructure Evelyn's personal estate, and create a civil marriage in a jurisdiction where her long-separated status and Graham's prior contractual waivers allowed it after a private decree. The details were complex, dry, and aggressively unromantic. Graham had signed away more than he remembered during a tax restructuring he never bothered to read. At first, Malcolm had been a shield. Then he became a friend. Then, slowly, carefully, and with more patience than Evelyn thought she deserved, he became the person she called when silence felt too heavy. Their marriage had remained private because Evelyn refused to turn one life into a scandal before the Gala funds were secure. Malcolm respected that. He never asked to be displayed. He never demanded public proof that he mattered. That alone made him different from Graham in every language Evelyn knew. Now he sat beside her, reviewing a revised donor protection statement. "This paragraph is too defensive," he said. Daniel Price blinked. Few people edited Evelyn directly. Evelyn looked at the page. It is accurate. Accurate can still sound cornered. Nora's mouth twitched. "I agree with Mr. Reed." "Of course you do," Evelyn said. Malcolm slid the page toward her. "Say the funds are protected. Say the programs continue. Say the committee chair has changed. You do not owe anyone a poem about your pain." Evelyn held his gaze for a moment. Warmth moved beneath her ribs, quiet and startling. He was not trying to make her smaller. He was trying to keep her from bleeding into documents where blood did not belong. "Fine," she said. "Cut the second paragraph." Daniel exhaled as if a weather system had passed. The meeting continued for 2 hours. They confirmed seating changes, security credentials, donor communications, press boundaries, and the recovery plan for the pearls. Lila had returned them through Graham's assistant after receiving a formal demand letter. The earrings were now locked in Nora's case. Evelyn had not decided whether to wear them. After the others left, Malcolm remained in the archive room. Rain had stopped outside, leaving the museum windows gray and reflective. "You are tired," he said. "I am efficient." "Those are not opposites." She leaned back in her chair. "Graham thinks I left because of Lila." "Partly you did." "I left because he brought her into my mother's house and asked me to be civil." Malcolm's face hardened slightly. "That would do it." "But the leaving started before then. I think I left in pieces. At dinners, in doctors' offices, in hotel lobbies where he forgot I was standing beside him." Malcolm did not rush to fill the silence. Evelyn looked at him. "Does that make me cowardly?" "No, it makes you someone who took time to stop calling survival loyalty." She closed her eyes. There were compliments Graham had given her for years: elegant, patient, reasonable, indispensable. Malcolm's sentence was not a compliment. It was more useful. It had a door in it. "At the gala," she said, "he will come." I assumed. "He will try to reclaim the room." "Probably." "And if he sees you take my hand?" Malcolm's expression did not change, but his voice softened. "Then he sees me take your hand. He will rage." "I know. You do not have to stand in it." He reached across the table, palm open, waiting. She placed her hand in his. "Evelyn," he said, "I did not marry you to stand nearby only when rooms are kind." The archive room was quiet around them, filled with old letters, donor ledgers, and the preserved paper history of people who had mistaken control for legacy. Evelyn looked at their joined hands and felt, not triumph, but steadiness. It was enough. Chapter 5. Graham arrived at the gala determined to look generous. He chose a midnight tuxedo because black felt too severe and navy photographed well. He wore his wedding ring because removing it would look guilty and keeping it would look wounded. He rehearsed 3 possible statements in the car: one warm, one firm, one sorrowful. All of them framed Evelyn as overwhelmed. Lila was not with him. That had not been his choice exactly. After the access review packet reached donors, Leela informed him through a text message that appearing together would be professionally unwise. Professionally unwise. 2 months earlier, she had called him the bravest man she knew. Now she sounded like a legal memo with perfume. Graham stepped from the car beneath the museum's white awning and smiled at the cameras. "Mr. West, will Mrs. West be joining you tonight?" "Evelyn and I remain deeply committed to the mission," he said smoothly. It was a good answer because it avoided the question and sounded like nobility. A few cameras flashed. He continued up the steps, shoulders relaxed, face composed. Inside, the Whitmore Museum glowed. The central hall had been transformed with tall arrangements of white branches and small gold lights that looked like trapped stars. The marble staircase swept down toward the reception floor. A string quartet played near the Roman gallery. Waiters moved with trays of champagne. Donors clustered beneath portraits of dead Whitmores who had perfected the art of looking disappointed in advance. For a few minutes, Graham recovered himself. People greeted him carefully, but they greeted him. Some shook his hand, some avoided his eyes. He could work with avoidance. Avoidance meant fear, discomfort, uncertainty. It did not mean defeat. Then he saw the program. Evelyn Whitmore, Gala chair. Not Evelyn Whitmore West. His jaw tightened. He turned the page. Malcolm Reed, keynote honoree. Graham knew the name. Of course he knew it. Reed's Legal Aid Network had received Whitmore support for years. Graham had dismissed him as one of Evelyn's earnest nonprofit men, useful for photographs with children and policy panels no one important watched. He had never considered him competition because Graham did not categorize men by character. He categorized them by market value. A donor approached. Graham, complicated week. Temporary noise, Graham said. Is it? Evelyn and I will resolve it. The donor's expression shifted with polite disbelief. Before he could answer, the lights softened near the staircase. The room turned. Evelyn appeared at the top of the stairs. For one bright, foolish second, Graham thought she had dressed for him. She wore a deep green gown with long sleeves and a neckline that revealed no desperation for attention. Her hair was pinned back, and at her ears were the pearls, Elaine Whitmore's pearls. Restored to their rightful place, they looked nothing like they had on Lila. On Lila, they had looked like stolen proof. On Evelyn, they looked like inheritance. Nora Keene descended a few steps behind her. Then Malcolm Reed appeared at Evelyn's side. He did not touch her at first. That restraint made Graham dislike him immediately. Men who waited for permission always looked virtuous to rooms that did not understand power. Evelyn paused on the landing, scanning the crowd with a calm Graham had mistaken for softness for years. Malcolm offered his hand. Evelyn took it. Not as a hostess accepting assistance. As a wife accepting the presence of her husband. Graham felt the room notice. He felt it like heat under his collar. The whispers began before Evelyn reached the bottom step. Who is he? Is that Malcolm Reed? Did she just... Graham moved before his attorney, who had wisely positioned himself near the bar, could intercept him. Evelyn. The music did not stop, but the air around them changed. Evelyn turned toward him. Malcolm remained beside her, hand still gently holding hers. Graham, she said. He looked at their joined hands. What exactly do you think you are doing? Evelyn's expression stayed composed. Hosting my mother's gala. With him? Malcolm spoke first. Good evening, Mr. West. Graham ignored him. You are making a spectacle. A faint sadness crossed Evelyn's face, not for herself, but for the predictability of him. You brought Lila into my home and asked me to be civil. Several nearby guests went still. Graham lowered his voice. This is not the place. You chose the house, Evelyn said. You chose the earrings. You chose the gala committee. You chose public rooms every time you thought they protected you. His eyes flashed. Do not lecture me in front of my donors. They are not your donors. The sentence cut cleanly through the music. Graham smiled, but the smile had teeth in it now. You think putting your maiden name on a program makes you powerful? Nora stepped forward. Mrs. Reed does not need a program for that. Graham froze. Not because of Nora's tone. Because of the name. Mrs. Reed. The room heard it too. Whispering sharpened. A journalist near the statue of Athena lifted her phone, then lowered it when a security officer looked directly at her. Graham turned slowly to Evelyn. What did she call you? Evelyn held Malcolm's hand a little more firmly. My legal name. That is impossible. No, Nora said. It is documented. Graham laughed once. Documented? Evelyn, have you lost your mind? Malcolm's voice remained level. Careful. The warning was quiet. That made it more effective. Graham looked at him with open contempt. You do not warn me in my city. Evelyn stepped slightly ahead of Malcolm, not because Malcolm needed protection, but because this was her boundary to draw. "You will not speak to my husband that way." "My husband." The word struck Graham visibly. His face drained, then flushed. "Your husband," he said. "You are my wife." "I was your wife in every way that mattered until you made dignity impossible," Evelyn said. "Legally, our marital separation was finalized months ago through the waiver structure you signed during your tax restructuring. You did not read it. Malcolm and I married privately after that." Graham stared at her. Around them, the Gala had become a courtroom without benches. "You tricked me," he said. For the first time that night, Evelyn's voice sharpened. "No, I trusted you to read a document that affected my life. You trusted your arrogance instead." Chapter 6. Graham's rage did not explode all at once. It gathered itself, layer by layer, under his polished face. First disbelief, then calculation, then public awareness. His eyes moved across the guests, measuring who had heard what, who might still be persuaded, who had already chosen the more interesting scandal over his version of events. "This is fraud," he said. Nora removed a thin folder from her black evening bag. Somehow, even at a gala, she looked as if she had been born to serve documents under chandeliers. "Mr. West, your counsel reviewed and acknowledged the separation and spousal waiver provisions 9 months ago. You signed them on March 2nd. You initialed the advisory rights termination on page 14. That was estate planning. It was labeled marital estate restructuring. I was told it was routine. By your own attorney." A few people nearby exchanged glances. Graham saw them and hated them for witnessing his ignorance. He turned on Evelyn because she was the only target who still carried history. "You hid a marriage while playing victim in my house?" Evelyn's eyes did not move from his. "I hid protection while you converted my grief into leverage." "Protection?" he spat. "You married him to protect money." Malcolm answered this time. "She married me because you had already abandoned the marriage and started building pathways into assets you did not own." "And you were waiting conveniently nearby?" "I was helping clinics keep children housed during treatment. That is where Evelyn met me. Work, Graham. You may remember the word from your speeches." The insult was mild in wording and lethal in delivery. Someone behind them coughed to hide a laugh. Graham stepped closer. Security shifted. Evelyn lifted one hand slightly, and the officers held position. She did not want him dragged away. Not yet. Dragging him away would let him become a victim too soon. "You think this room will applaud you?" Graham said. "A woman who replaces her husband in secret?" Evelyn looked around the hall. Faces watched from beneath soft lights. Some curious, some shocked, some ashamed. She saw Victor Hale near the donor wall. She saw the museum director, pale but steady. She saw young doctors from the clinics, scholarship families, board members, reporters pretending not to record with their eyes. "This room does not need to applaud me," she said. "It needs to understand why the governance changed." The large screen above the main staircase lit up. Not with scandalous messages, not with bedroom photographs. Evelyn had refused anything that turned private humiliation into entertainment. Instead, a simple slide appeared. Protected programs and governance updates. Below it were 3 columns. Clinic funding secured, scholarship endowment protected, Gala committee restructured. Then came the facts. Graham's consulting approvals for Lila's agency. Travel expenses charged to donor outreach. Sponsor access sold through unofficial channels. Guest list manipulation tied to private business introductions. No adjectives, no fury, just records. Graham looked at the screen, then at Evelyn. "Turn it off." "No." "Evelyn." "No." The second no was quieter. It carried 8 years of late arrivals, public corrections, cold apologies, and the night she walked out in the rain. Lila entered during the 3rd slide. Her timing was almost cinematic, though Evelyn doubted she intended it. Lila wore a black dress, no jewelry, and the brittle composure of someone who had spent the last 3 days speaking to lawyers. She stopped near the entrance when she saw the screen. Graham saw her too. "Why are you here?" he demanded. Lila lifted her chin. "I was invited to provide a statement to the review committee." "You were not invited to the gala." "No," Nora said. "She was invited to the building." The distinction seemed to satisfy no one, but it was legally meaningful, which meant Nora enjoyed it. Lila walked forward. The room parted for her with the unpleasant fascination people reserve for a woman they have already decided how to judge. She glanced once at Evelyn's ears. The pearls gleamed there, quiet and unreachable. "I returned them," Lila said. "You did," Evelyn replied. "I should not have worn them." "No." Lila swallowed. "He said you knew. He said the marriage was finished and you stayed because the family image needed him." Graham snapped, "Lila." She looked at him. "You told me the donor access packages were standard. You told me the payments were approved. You told me Evelyn was too cold to care about anything but appearances. Stop talking. That is what you say to women when they become inconvenient." The room went silent in a new way. Evelyn did not soften toward Lila. The woman had made choices. She had enjoyed Evelyn's displacement. She had walked into another woman's home wearing inherited pearls. But accountability had layers, and Lila had finally reached one. Nora gestured to an auditor who stepped forward to collect the envelope Lila carried. Graham's attorney reached him at last and spoke urgently near his ear. Graham shook him off. "You are all very proud," he said, voice rising. "But let us be honest. This gala exists because I made it visible. I brought sponsors. I brought press. I made the Whitmore name relevant again." Evelyn looked at him with almost gentle disbelief. "My mother built clinics before you learned how to pronounce philanthropy in front of cameras." That one landed. Even Malcolm looked briefly at the floor, perhaps to hide his expression. Graham's control cracked. "You ungrateful." He stopped himself too late. The word he did not say mattered less than the hand he raised. It was not a strike, not quite. A pointing gesture, abrupt and too close to Evelyn's face. Malcolm moved with calm speed and took Evelyn's hand, drawing her back half a step. Security closed in. Graham stared at their joined hands as if the sight had committed violence against him. "Do not touch her," he said. Malcolm looked at him. "She decides that." Evelyn felt the room shift behind her, felt the old story losing its last thread. Graham did not rage because she had betrayed him. He raged because someone had taken her hand without asking his permission, and she had allowed it. That was the wound he could not bear. Chapter 7. The gala did not collapse. That was Evelyn's victory. Security escorted Graham to a private side room, not the street. Nora insisted on dignity because chaos frightened donors and donors funded beds. Graham's attorney followed, already speaking in low, desperate bursts. Lila was taken to the review office with the auditor. The string quartet resumed after a pause so awkward that the first notes sounded like furniture being moved in the dark. Then Malcolm squeezed Evelyn's hand once. "Breathe." She did. The air entered her body like something she had forgotten she was allowed to use. Nora approached. "You can cancel the remarks." "No." "You can shorten them." "No." "You can at least drink water." Evelyn accepted the glass. "That I can do." 5 minutes later, she stood at the podium beneath the Whitmore portraits. Her face appeared on the side screens. She saw, with a strange detachment, that she looked calm, not untouched. Calm. "Good evening," she began. No one moved. "Many of you came tonight expecting a celebration of civic generosity. Some of you have instead witnessed an uncomfortable governance correction." A ripple moved through the hall. It was not laughter exactly, but relief recognizing intelligence. Evelyn continued. "My mother believed charity should never depend on the ego of the person holding the microphone. I have thought about that often this week." This time, a few people did laugh softly. The Whitmore Civic Futures Gala funds pediatric trauma rooms, education grants, legal navigation for vulnerable families, and emergency housing support connected to our clinics. Those programs are protected. They will continue. Restricted funds have been reviewed. Committee access has been corrected. No patient, student, or family will pay the price for failures of judgment in this room or any other. Her eyes found Malcolm near the first column. He watched her, steady and proud without trying to own the moment. "I also want to say something about civility," Evelyn said. The word changed the room. Civility is not silence in the face of disrespect. It is not asking the injured person to protect the comfort of the person causing harm. It is not a wife smiling while her home, her history, and her dignity are treated as props. True civility begins with truth. It requires boundaries, it requires records. Sometimes it requires leaving a house in the rain. No one clapped yet. The room was too busy listening. Tonight is not about revenge. Revenge is too small for what my mother built. Tonight is about stewardship. It is about making sure generosity does not become a costume for vanity. It is about remembering that institutions survive only when private courage becomes public accountability. She paused. Thank you for staying, thank you for giving, and thank you in advance for reading the revised committee policies before signing them. That broke the tension. Laughter rose, followed by applause. Not wild, not vulgar, but sustained. Evelyn stepped back from the podium and felt the sound move around her without needing to hide inside it. The gala continued. Dinner was served, pledges were made. A surgeon spoke about the trauma rooms. A scholarship recipient named Amara described working night shifts while finishing her nursing degree. Malcolm delivered his keynote without mentioning Graham once. He spoke about children who aged out of systems and into paperwork no one had taught them to read. By the end, several donors had increased their commitments. That, more than Graham's humiliation, nearly made Evelyn cry. At 11, she slipped into the sculpture garden for air. The city glittered beyond the museum wall. The rain had washed the sky clean, and the cold made her skin feel awake. Malcolm found her beside a bronze fountain. You disappeared, he said. I relocated. Strategically? Emotionally. He smiled and offered his coat. She accepted it because accepting care was another thing she was learning not to treat as weakness. You were magnificent, he said. Careful, that sounds like a gala compliment. Then I will be more specific. You protected the work while telling the truth. That is hard. She looked down at the pearls in her palm. She had removed them after dinner and placed them in a small silk pouch. When Lila wore these, I thought I would feel better once I got them back. Did you? Not exactly. They are still just earrings. The insult was never really about the pearls. It was about him believing nothing of yours was sacred unless he valued it. Evelyn looked at him. Yes. Malcolm nodded, not pleased with his accuracy, just present with it. Inside, through the tall windows, guests moved under golden light. Graham was nowhere visible. Later, Evelyn would learn he left through a service exit after signing an acknowledgement of the review terms. He would issue a statement calling the evening unfortunate. He would try, briefly, to suggest he had stepped down voluntarily. The records would outlast him. For now, Evelyn allowed herself not to think about him. Malcolm held out his hand. May I? The question was small. It nearly undid her. She placed her hand in his. They walked back into the gala together, not as a spectacle, not as a correction to Graham's story, but as two people entering a room where she no longer had to stand alone to prove she was strong. Chapter 8. The morning after the gala, the city chose its favorite version. Some headlines focused on Graham's fall from the Whitmore Committee. Some preferred Leela's dramatic arrival. A few lingered over Evelyn's new name with the appetite of strangers discovering that a woman had made private decisions without asking public permission. Evelyn read none of them at breakfast. She sat in the sunroom at Whitmore House with coffee, dry toast, and the revised committee policies. Nora sat across from her, already marking a document with a fountain pen. Malcolm had left at dawn to meet with a family court team representing two sisters in emergency placement. He had kissed Evelyn's forehead before leaving, then paused to ask whether that was all right. She had pulled him back by his tie and kissed him properly. That memory warmed her more than the coffee. Nora noticed because Nora noticed everything. You look less tragic. How generous. I am known for softness. Evelyn smiled and turned a page. What happens to Graham? Committee removal is complete. His remaining advisory permissions are suspended. The museum will not pursue a public civil action if he cooperates with repayment and disclosure. And if he does not? Nora's eyes sharpened. Then he learns the difference between reputation management and litigation. Evelyn looked out at the garden. The grass still shone with rain. I do not want to spend the next year destroying him. Good, destruction is time-consuming. I want the programs clean. I want the clinics funded. I want the scholarship families untouched. I want Lila accountable, but I do not want a public stoning. That can be arranged. Evelyn looked back. Can it? With difficulty, which is why I remain employed. They worked until noon. By then, Graham had called twice and sent one message through counsel requesting a private conversation. Evelyn declined. Not forever, perhaps, but certainly that day. A woman did not owe immediate access to a man simply because consequence had made him lonely. In the afternoon, she visited the house she had left. She did not go alone. Nora came, as did a property manager and 2 inventory specialists. Malcolm offered to join her, but Evelyn said no, not because she wanted distance from him, because she needed to walk through those rooms under her own power. The house looked unchanged from outside, ivy along the brick, black door, brass knocker shaped like a lion's head. Inside, the foyer smelled faintly of furniture polish and the lilies Graham always ordered because he forgot she disliked their heaviness. The east guest room had been stripped. Lila's overnight bag was gone. The bed had been remade. On the dresser sat a note in Lila's handwriting. I should have refused to enter. I know that does not repair it. No signature. Evelyn read it once and placed it in the inventory folder. She did not forgive Lila in that moment. She did not need to. The note could remain what it was, insufficient, but not meaningless. In the master bedroom, Evelyn opened the safe. The blue velvet case was empty because the pearls were with Nora. Other pieces remained: a sapphire brooch, her mother's watch, a gold bracelet from her grandmother. Objects Graham had not noticed because their value was not obvious enough for his cruelty. She packed them herself. In the library, she found Graham's glass from the night she left still on the side table. Someone had washed it and returned it to place. That offended her more than if it had been left dirty. Cleanliness could make even arrogance look civilized. She stood there for a long time. This was the room where she had edited his first major speech. This was where he had cried after his father called him a social climber. This was where he had asked her to host the museum trustees because people listened when she softened the air. This was where he later told her she was lucky he liked quiet women. Nora appeared at the doorway. You do not have to decide today. I know. The trust can lease it, sell it, close it, convert it. Evelyn ran her fingers along the back of the leather chair. My mother loved this house. Your mother loved what houses could hold, not the walls themselves. That helped. Evelyn looked around the library once more and imagined it without Graham's bar cart, without his awards, without the heavy desk he bought to look ancestral. She imagined children reading here, scholarship interviews, legal clinics, a place where women who needed documents, counsel, and a room to breathe could sit by the fire without being asked to be civil to their own undoing. Convert it, she said. Nora's eyebrows lifted. Into? A residence program. Temporary stays for mothers with children receiving treatment at the clinic. Legal aid offices twice a week. A small library. Keep the garden. Nora wrote it down as if Evelyn had suggested repainting a hallway instead of transforming the graveyard of a marriage into shelter. That will irritate Graham, Nora said. Evelyn looked at the room where she had waited for him to become kind. No, she said. It will outgrow him. Chapter 9. 6 months later, the house opened again. There was no ribbon cutting for cameras. Evelyn refused the kind of ceremony that would make survival look decorative. Instead, the first family arrived on a cold morning in March. A grandmother named Ruth, her daughter Nina, and Nina's 6-year-old son Theo, who needed weekly treatment at the Whitmore Clinic and loved outer space. Theo chose the east guest room because the window faced the moon when the sky was clear. Evelyn stood in the hallway while staff carried in donated luggage. The red heels were gone. The scent of lilies was gone. The pearls were locked safely at Whitmore House, no longer needed as proof of anything. On the wall near the staircase, a small plaque read Elaine House, Family Residence and Legal Support Center. No mention of Evelyn. No mention of Graham. That felt right. Malcolm arrived late, carrying a box of children's books under one arm and a stack of legal intake forms under the other. Theo immediately asked whether any of the books had rockets. Malcolm crouched and began sorting through the box with the seriousness of a man searching evidence. Evelyn watched them from the foyer. For years, she had believed love announced itself through sacrifice. Graham had made sacrifice feel like proof. If she hurt quietly enough, waited beautifully enough, forgave quickly enough, then perhaps the marriage would become worthy of what she had invested. But love, she had learned, did not require a woman to disappear in installments. Love could be Malcolm asking before touching her hand. It could be Nora telling the truth without decorating it. It could be a house remade so strangers had somewhere safe to sleep. It could be the decision not to turn pain into a throne. That afternoon, after the family settled, Evelyn walked into the garden. Early spring had begun to show in small green points beneath the hedges. The fountain was still covered for winter. The air smelled like soil and rain. Graham called as she reached the old stone bench. She almost let it go to voicemail, then she answered. "Evelyn," he said. His voice sounded older, not broken. Graham would likely never give anyone the satisfaction of brokenness, but thinner, less certain. "Graham, I heard what you did with the house. It opened today." A pause. "My father sent me the article." Of course there had been an article despite her refusal. A small one, local, focused on the families and the clinic. No scandal, no gala photograph, no mention of the foyer. "It is a good use for the property," she said. Was that meant to punish me? There it was. Still, somehow the assumption that her choices revolved around him. Evelyn sat on the bench. "No, that is why it will last." He said nothing. She could hear traffic on his end, perhaps wind. For the first time, she did not try to picture where he was. "I was cruel," he said finally. "Yes." "About Lila, about the house, about everything." "Yes." Another silence. "Do you hate me?" Once, she would have softened the answer to protect him from the consequences of asking. Now she gave him something cleaner. "No, I have put you where you belong." "Where is that?" "In my past." The words did not feel dramatic, they felt accurate. Graham breathed out. "And him?" Evelyn looked through the window toward the library, where Malcolm was helping Theo place a rocket book on the lowest shelf. "He is beside me." "You love him?" "Yes." This silence was longer. "I thought you needed me," Graham said, so quietly she almost missed it. Evelyn closed her eyes. There was the whole story, folded into one sentence. "Not I thought you loved me. Not I thought I loved you. I thought you needed me." "I know," she said. "I was wrong." "Yes." She ended the call without anger. Inside the house, Theo laughed at something Malcolm said. Nora was probably in the front room correcting a volunteer's filing system. Ruth was making tea in the kitchen because some women restored themselves by feeding people. Life was filling the rooms with sounds that did not ask permission from memory. Evelyn returned to the foyer and stood at the foot of the staircase. This was where Graham had brought his mistress home. This was where he had asked her to be civil. This was where she had walked out in the rain and mistaken the cold for an ending. Now a child ran past her wearing socks with planets on them, and the house did not echo with betrayal. It held new footsteps, new names, new reasons to keep the lights on. Malcolm came to stand beside her. "You okay?" She looked at his hand. He did not reach until she did. Then she took it. "Yes," she said. "I think this is what peace sounds like." He listened to the house, a little loud. "Good." Evelyn smiled. At the gala, Graham had raged when her new husband took her hand because he finally understood that she had not left to be chased. She had left to be free. The house, the pearls, the name, the gala, the money, the marriage, all of it had only been the visible part of a deeper return. Evelyn Whitmore Reed had not become powerful when a room discovered her documents. She had become powerful the night she stopped asking cruelty to call itself love. And from that new height, she built something no betrayal could enter. Subscribe for more stories from her new peak, where quiet women rise, hidden power speaks, and betrayal finally meets consequences.